Hello Dave, here on the Bitwig stand at Synthfest. You're a new face for Bitwig and there's a new update. See what I did there?
Clever, I appreciate that. A fine segue, yes. With 2.4, which has come out recently in the past month or so, it saw a vast overhaul of our sampler. So it's taking something that's familiar to our users and trying to make it more friendly in an interface way, but also adding a lot more performance options and sneaking in some new synthesis techniques into the sampler. So
yeah, let's have a look.
Yeah, so if we take a look here, what we've got is kind of similar to before. In this case, I'm just defining my start points and end points, these nice yellow flags that are highlighted in both places. So if I'm just playing some samples in the normal fashion, they'll change pitch, and you see the individual playheads there, which is a nice reflection at different speeds, because in normal sampling mode, pitch equals speed. I'll just throw one other layer on top of there, and now when we have looping, you again get another visual reflection of it, or if you prefer, we can give you the big screen view for easier editing. So now I'm seeing my sample start points and my loop range.
Really tight, yeah, you can get right in.
Yeah, as well as this kind of crossfade gradient there is visually showing you the crossfade amount for the looping. So if I were to drag that to be less, it kind of focuses in, there's no fading anymore. And now as you see the border getting loose, that's actually a visual representation of how much crossfade is occurring. Now we've got this palindrome looping going back and forth. So you can kind of have...
Right, so you've got decent complex loop setup. So can you have more than one loop point? I mean, is it just simple?
Well, in this, what's interesting is you define the initial loop points to start with, but then based on the modular architecture that's built into Bitwig, these things become controllable.
Right,
so
okay.
I've defined them within the waveform as you saw, but now I have these little targets down below labeled offsets that will let you, while a note is playing, actually transpose the entire loop portion or the length of it by itself.
Okay, so
and of course, you don't have to do that. You could say, well, I want to load any of our standard modulators, like maybe a step sequencer. And now if I give some random values and say, well, how about you help me and actually move the loop position over time, and we can zoom back out.
Okay. So I mean, so it takes that modular approach that you started to introduce. So I guess it's the G word. Does it do granular? Obviously, we need to ask that. You know,
that is an important question, and luckily I can tell you why. Yes, it does. So, along with the controls and the interfaces that have been built in, I'll mute that step sequencer for a moment. What has also come in are some additional playback modes. So repitch is your traditional sampler. Pitch equals length, speed, you know, like on a tape machine. Speed and pitch are tied together. Now cycles introduces a bit of wavetable, but we can skip ahead for a moment and go to textures, which is doing a granular playback mode. So now these controls I've got for speed and grain size and motion actually add a little subtlety to the playhead, because if you think of it in granular terms, it's really just a series of tiny loops being played over and over again. So it's just another layer on top. So if I were to play with the same sound for a moment, and then either bring down the grain size to kind of fractalize it a bit, size will make it more recognizable. Motion is actually a little bit of, to keep it from being robotic, it adds a little bit of play, so that the playhead actually nudges a bit, so you're not just stuck with a static sound. As well as just slowing it down speed-wise in that granular way.
So, I mean, aside from that, this is great on the synthesis front. I mean, I guess in terms of playability, you know, velocity layers, crossfades, that kind of stuff. What are the sort of numbers for that? How many layers can you put in? How many groups?
The number of layers. Well, for the play engine, you could have 8 layers triggering simultaneously. So that's a little deeper than most people would want to go with it, but it'll support that much. And just on the side of working with multi-samples, we've actually put a lot of work in there because whatever platform you're in, multi-sample editing is never necessarily fun. So we've tried to make it a lot easier so you can create an interesting result. I could just grab some audio files and throw them in and give you a sense of that. So I've got this here. If I were to go ahead and say, I'm going to convert this to a multi-sample mode, where now I can have multiple zones, and I don't even want my original audio. Let's just get rid of it for a moment. So now, from somewhere off screen, I've got some just randomly downloaded sample files from the internet, which fortunately have root numbers in there. I'll drag them up into here. And you can see immediately as I drag it in, it's reading whatever metadata happens to be in those files. So it knows the root keys for everything, and it's automatically creating a perfectly playable sample map across the entire keyboard.
Right, got you. Oh, right, okay.
Still with my funny granular processing on a Casio flute. But that's one way to do it. But there's a lot of other macros in here that just make it very simple. I can give you one simple example of a kind of detail-oriented thing. I will grab exactly the same samples, but instead of dragging them here, I could drag them into the velocity zone area, and you'll see it's immediately saying, oh, you want to stack all of these, but put them in cascading velocities.
Right.
Or almost more interesting, there is this star-based select parameter, and I'll show you what that means. Again, it looks like velocity, where it's just evenly distributing them. But now this select knob down here in the interface just below, so as I move that, if you look up here on the screen, you will see I am manually controlling.
Right, so you can, which you could map to velocity or map to whatever, I suppose.
Or say the Z plane on an MPE controller, so you're actually moving between different sound layers. Sure, it's just, we've just been trying to find ways to put advanced workflows in simpler methods so that you can have access to them.
Neat.
So,
So
yeah.
this is, I mean, this is one of the bigger, so this is, it's been out for a couple of weeks now.
About a month, I think.
And available at all good, at bitwig.com, right?
You could start there, yes. And yes, and all excellent retailers around the world.
So you get it as part of the upgrade plan, or can you buy it? How does the actual upgrade
Sure.
plan?
So the upgrade plan, at whatever point you get a license for Bitwig 2, you have 1 year of free upgrades, which means any major upgrades that come in the next year will be included. So a lot of people who had Bitwig 2 got Bitwig 2.4 for free. If you happen to have your upgrade plan expire, you can extend it for another year at whatever point you want. So yeah, as long as you have an active upgrade plan, whatever update comes, like this is a major version for us, so whenever that comes, it'll be available to you immediately.
Oh, so is this out now, or has it just been announced?
It's out.
It's out now, right? Okay, I just wanted to.
Yeah, we've gone through public beta and it's real, so it's there.
Thank you very much.
Oh, my pleasure. Cheers.